Tuesday night. The scent of rosemary and garlic drifted through the apartment, soft and slow, just like the jazz humming from the speakers. I'd seared the meat perfectly, let the broth simmer low, and opened the Malbec we both liked, the one she called dangerously smooth. Two place settings waited on the reclaimed wood table she'd picked out herself, back when we still played house like it meant something. The dim light from the kitchen pendant made everything glow a little warmer. I lit the last candle, her favorite, orange blossom and cedar. Then my phone buzzed. Hey. Her voice tried for casual, but something cracked at the edges. Don't stress, I'll be late. And then, underneath her words, came laughter. Male. Too close. Too easy. The kind of laugh that doesn't come from a stranger. It wasn't a bar laugh or a podcast in the background. It was personal, familiar. It hit like a chord I hadn't realized I already knew. I didn't ask where she was, didn't ask who he was. Didn't even let the stew bubble over. I just said, take your time. I'll need it to pack your stuff. Then I ended the call. No slam, no scream, just a soft click and the sound of my own breathing. Hey, quick thing before I go on. If you're still here listening, it means something clicked. Most people never subscribe, but it helps more than you know. Tap that like hit subscribe. It keeps the stories coming. Back to it. I walked over to the hallway closet, pulled it open. Inside, the overnight bags she never used, the boxes I'd flattened and stored behind the coats. I hadn't planned this moment. Not exactly, but I'd imagined it. Quietly, over time. Like a thought that grows roots behind your ribs. Not because I'd caught her in anything specific before. Just the pattern. Her phone flipped face down at dinner. The extra 20 minutes she could never explain. That time, I asked her to take a selfie, and she said she didn't feel camera ready, but I'd seen a notification pop up from someone named Dean. I'd smiled, let it pass. You don't accuse people with no proof, right? You wait, you observe, and if you're like me, if you've been underestimated enough times, you prepare. I pulled out the bags, lined them on the bed, started in the closet. I folded her dresses the way she liked, zipped her favorite boots in plastic, pulled down the box marked winter. She joked once that I was too neat, said it like an insult. I took it as insurance. Photo frames came next, not the pictures, just the frames. I removed the prints, slid them into a manila envelope, a clean break. By the time the candles burned down to nubs, the bedroom was clean. No scent of her perfume, no hair ties on the nightstand, just a single set of sheets left folded at the edge of the bed. White neutral, like a reset. I checked the clock. It had been 25 minutes. Maybe she was still laughing. Maybe she thought I hadn't caught it. Maybe she didn't care. None of it mattered. I opened the window to let the stew smell fade, blew out the candle, packed the wine away. The night wasn't ruined, it was revealed. I didn't cry, didn't break things. I just moved. With clarity, with the quiet kind of rage, the kind that doesn't need witnesses. I moved like I was following instructions only I could hear. Not rushed, not dazed, just deliberate. Every motion had the quiet muscle memory of someone who'd already rehearsed the leaving. Her winter coats, the ones I dry cleaned each spring, into the garment bags. Her skincare shelf, alphabetized by brand and weight, packed with tissue, sealed with care. Her shoes, all color-coded in those little clear boxes. I stacked them like I was inventorying a storefront. I didn't throw anything, didn't slam a door, didn't even let the packing tape make noise. Just peeled it gently, smoothed it over cardboard seams like I'd done this before. Because I had. In my head. Too many nights to count. I took down the canvas print of us in Barcelona. The one she captioned, "My whole world," in one photo. I'd always hated that trip. She barely spoke to me after the second day, said I was too quiet. I wrapped the frame in bubble wrap, placed it face down in the largest box marked Wall Decor Her. I labeled everything. Her kitchen, her office, her closet, left side. She always claimed she hated clutter. I wanted to leave her life neatly folded, like a drawer she could close and never open again. By 10:30, the boxes lined the front hallway like soldiers. The air smelled like tape, dust, and cinnamon from the candle I'd blown out. Her keys were still in the bowl by the door. I took them out, looped them through a labeled envelope, and slipped it into her purse. I only kept one thing. A small ceramic dish with a crack down the middle, the one she made at a paint-your-own pottery place before we met. She said it was useless but kept it anyway, said it reminded her that imperfect things still held value. I didn't keep it for sentiment. I kept it because she wouldn't remember where it went, and I wanted her to feel that emptiness, that absence she couldn't quite name. At midnight sharp, the knock came. "Ms. Rayleigh's unit?" the mover asked. "Not anymore," I said. The doorman helped, didn't ask questions, just nodded like he understood. We loaded everything into the back of the truck, quietly, no scraping furniture, no dragging boxes, just thud, lift, slide, over and over until the unit looked like it had been staged for a sale. I handed the mover a folded paper with an address she once gave me for emergency contact. It wasn't recent, wasn't far, but it wasn't mine. And that was the point. He gave me a look, half professional, half curious. I didn't explain. He didn't ask. That kind of silence becomes its own language. By the time I turned off the lights, the only thing left was the folded set of white sheets on the bare bed. I didn't take them because they weren't hers. I'd bought them after our first fight when she didn't come home. The fight had been about a coworker. She said I was overreacting, called me insecure. I'd said nothing, just gone to the store and bought new sheets. That night, I slept on them alone. And tonight, I would again, but only once more, because in the morning, I wouldn't be here, and neither would she. By morning, the apartment was sterile. Her perfume had evaporated from the air. The space looked more like a showroom than a home. No photos, no toothbrush on the counter, no jacket slung across the back of a chair. Just a clean, expensive quiet. I left early, didn't wait for confrontation. The moving truck had dropped her boxes at the address I'd given. I hadn't bothered to confirm receipt. At 8:17 a.m., the first text came. "Hey, I think my key's broken." No greeting, no apology, just confusion, wrapped in that same breezy tone she always used when she forgot something important, like birthdays or boundaries. At 8:22, another pinged. "My email's not letting me in. Did you change something?" Yes, I changed everything. Her access to the apartment was disabled at 7 o'clock a.m., sharp, automated through the building management's portal. I'd scheduled it a week ago, just in case. The same morning routine we used to share, coffee, quick kiss, 2 laptops open at the kitchen counter, was now hers to recreate somewhere else. She didn't know that our email domain was tied to my LLC, that the shared Google Drive, the tax software, the household spreadsheets all lived under one master credential, mine. She didn't know because she never cared to. She liked that I handled the boring stuff. She said it like a compliment. At 8:46, the tone shifted. "Seriously, what the hell's happening?" I let it sit. I was at a cafe across town by then, sipping black coffee from a chipped ceramic mug, listening to a pair of students argue about urban planning like the world would crack without their thesis. I opened my phone, typed one sentence. "Check the prenup, section 6. Sent, no follow-up, no emoji, no explanation. 3 years ago, she'd been late to the notary. Hair still wet from the shower, tapping through emails while the paralegal summarized the contract. I'd watched her flip pages without reading. She signed where tabs told her to, then dashed off to catch a flight to Miami, some yoga retreat with her college roommate. I stayed behind, filed the paperwork, made sure every clause had teeth. Section 6. In the event of clear abandonment or breach of fidelity, Party B forfeits rights to shared digital assets, account access, and residence privileges. The notary had initialed the margin. So had she, not because she understood it, but because she trusted I'd never invoke it. At 9:12, she called. I didn't answer. Then another text. "You're being insane. This is extreme. We can talk. Just stop this." There it was. The bargaining. Not quite guilt. Not quite regret. Just the sharp edge of someone realizing the stage is shifting under their heels. She didn't ask what I'd heard last night. Didn't admit whose laugh that was. She still thought this was about inconvenience, passwords, property. She didn't understand that the locks weren't just digital, they were emotional, legal, structural, and they were already turning. I closed my laptop, left cash on the table, walked out into the noise of the city. She wasn't locked out of a building, she was locked out of a life, one she thought would always make room for her. She arrived like she expected the world to pause. Hair smooth, lipstick bold, heels clicking with the tempo of someone used to doors opening before they even knocked. A week ago, she would have breezed through the glass doors without a glance, waved at Mark behind the front desk like she barely remembered his name. Now she stood frozen just past the revolving door, blinking at the new concierge she didn't recognize. "I'm here for Unit 18F, she said, adjusting the strap of her purse. "It's my apartment." The young man glanced down at his tablet, scrolled. "I'm sorry, ma'am. That unit is no longer assigned to your name." She stiffened. "That's impossible. I live there." He didn't argue, just tapped to the next screen. "I can't grant access without approval from the current primary tenant," he said, with the kind of polite detachment only training could produce. "Do you have written permission or a digital code?" Her jaw clenched. "I don't need a code. My name is—" He interrupted with a small nod toward the wall-mounted screen. It displayed a list of approved visitors. She wasn't on it. She pulled out her phone, dialed, waited, pressed it tighter to her ear. Voicemail, again, voicemail. She hung up, then stood there, trying to pretend it was all some clerical mix-up, like she was the victim of a scheduling error, not a reckoning. Her purse, sleek and designer, hung heavy on her arm like it might contain a solution, but all it had were habits. Lip balm, credit cards, familiarity. Mark stepped out from the side hallway then, holding a delivery box. He paused, did a double take. "Evening," he said, guarded. Relief rushed into her face. "Mark, tell him. I live here. Unit 18F. It's me." Mark looked at her like she was an old classmate whose name he couldn't quite remember. Not cruel, just distant. He shrugged. "Management updated the tenant list this morning. You're not on it." "I've been here for 3 years." "I know," he said, "but the paperwork doesn't." She stood there, breathing shallow, pressed one hand to the marble counter as if the cold surface might stabilize her. "I need to go upstairs." "I left things. Everything was moved out yesterday," Mark said. "Building policy required we hold it 24 hours. The storage team released it this morning to a verified transport company." Her voice dropped. "Transported where?" "I couldn't say," he replied. "That's between the tenant and their service provider." Another voicemail. She didn't even say my name this time. Just, please call me. This is insane." The young concierge stood awkwardly nearby, unsure if he should call security or offer water. Mark gave her one last look, sympathetic but firm. "If there's nothing else, ma'am." She stepped back. The revolving door moved slower this time, like the building itself had no urgency to release her. Outside, the air was sharp with spring wind. She stood there for a long time, not pacing, just not moving, like the sidewalk had betrayed her too. She didn't know where to go. Not really. Her whole life had been one big guarantee that she could leave and return and be welcomed. That forgiveness was a cycle, that my patience was eternal. But forgiveness isn't a doormat, and patience isn't a lease. By the time she pulled her phone out again, she saw the new message. "This number is no longer in service." She clutched the device, looked up at the building like it might change its mind. But I wasn't watching. I wasn't behind a curtain or down the hall. I wasn't waiting to be begged. I was across town, in a space where nothing reminded me of her voice, her scent, or the weight of needing to explain myself. New address, new number, new rules, and none of them had her name on them. The place didn't look like much. One room, no insulation, windows that stuck in their frames when it rained, but the lock worked. And it was mine. It sat above a garage that still used paper invoices and a rusted Coke machine for change. The sign out front read Vic's Auto since 1973. I found it on a classifieds board 3 days after the night everything folded. Vic didn't ask for references. He looked me over once and said, "Don't leave food out. The raccoons are bold." That was it. I slept on a cot the first month, ate canned soup, wore the same 3 shirts in rotation, no TV, just a fan that ticked when it spun, and a space heater that coughed before it warmed up. The silence was absolute at night. No city hum, no clicking heels in the hallway, just the pop of metal cooling in the shop below, and sometimes Vic's oldies station echoing up through the floorboards. I didn't miss the apartment, or her, or the way she'd sigh when I didn't guess her mood right the first time. I missed the illusion of certainty, that brittle comfort of routine, the version of myself I thought she'd see one day if I just held on a little longer. Days I swept the garage, sorted tools, helped Vic rebuild dashboards and calibrate old systems most dealers won't touch anymore. He grunted at my precision, but by week 2 he started letting me finish the jobs. We rarely spoke, but I could tell he liked that I didn't need to be told twice. I liked that he never asked me why I was there. At night, I studied. Not for revenge, not for some master plan, just because I needed to rebuild something. So I opened my laptop and started reading contracts, transportation law, logistics models, import codes. I traced the invisible veins that made cities breathe, fleets, delivery zones, infrastructure loopholes. I wasn't trying to make a name. I was trying to make sense of movement, of systems, of how people leave you long before they physically walk out, and how to make sure you never need to chase them again. I built models, tested theories, started consulting for small fleet owners quietly. No business cards, just referrals, mechanics who trusted me, drivers who saw that I actually understood what wear and tear meant, not on paper but in practice. I crawled under trucks, helped replace timing belts, sat through DOT audits with a flashlight in one hand and legal code in the other. 2 years in, I filed paperwork for a consultancy, registered a name, got a mailbox that wasn't tied to a residential address. I wore clean boots now, had 3 clients across 2 states, nothing flashy, no Instagram reels, just results. And peace. I never posted about it, never bragged. I didn't need to. She never knew how deeply I'd started over, how precisely I understood the machinery that moved people, or how familiar betrayal felt, like a gear slipping in silence until everything ceases. I didn't need to be seen to be succeeding, because I wasn't building a comeback. I was building something clean, quiet, and unbreakable, something hers could never touch. The envelope was plain, no return address, just my name, handwritten in careful block letters, as if someone wasn't sure if I'd want to open it. Inside, a single clip magazine page, folded once, neatly. Meet Logan Baird, revolutionizing urban transport. It took me a second. I hadn't known it was running. The interview had been 6 months ago, tucked into a long list of emerging voices the editor said might not make the cut. But there it was, my face, high resolution and confident, standing beside a gleaming row of modular E-Fleet vehicles outside the new cross-state logistics hub. The photo caught something I hadn't planned. I was smiling. Not wide, not fake. A closed lip anchored smile. Calm, certain. The kind of expression that comes when you no longer owe your life to anyone else's permission. Below the photo, she lives in a converted studio above a vintage auto shop. Her firm currently handles strategic infrastructure for 3 regional municipalities and 2 major supply chains. When asked what drives her, she replied simply, "Movement should serve the people who make it possible." No flair, no revenge arc, just facts, the way I preferred them. I laid the page flat on the counter, next to my black coffee and half-eaten toast. I thought of her immediately, not with longing, not even anger, just certainty. She'd seen it. She would have found out the second someone from her world, one of the polished ones who still posted curated life updates, messaged her a screenshot. Maybe it was that girl Marin she always used to compare me to. Maybe someone from her yoga studio who remembered my name just well enough to stir curiosity. Maybe even Dean. She would have stared at the photo longer than she'd admit, would have zoomed in, noted the sharper jawline, the confidence in my stance, noticed the lack of jewelry, the unbranded clothes, how still I looked, how unfazed, because what she left was never replaced with a louder version of me. It was refined. She used to call my silence passive. Said, I didn't push for what I deserved, but silence isn't absence. It's observation. It's design. And now, the proof lived in glossy print. Circulating in lobbies, sitting in executive lounges, placed in boardrooms where deals start with introductions like, "She's the one behind that city reroute project. They saved millions." I didn't want her attention, but I wasn't afraid of it anymore. She'd know now that the life she once folded herself into had outgrown the walls we built together, that the person who used to make her tea after late flights was now advising regional grid networks, that the quiet she once resented had been the foundation of everything she never took time to understand. I placed the clipping in a drawer, not for safekeeping, just so it wouldn't get stained. The inbox pinged. A logistics firm in Oregon wanted to schedule a consult. I confirmed. Closed the tab. Then, almost reflexively, I checked the blocked numbers list on my phone. Her name wasn't there, not yet. Part of me wanted to leave the line open, not for reconciliation, but for confirmation. I wanted to hear her try to mask surprise with false warmth, to hear the stumble in her voice when she realized she no longer had the upper hand. But she hadn't called, not yet. She would, not because she missed me, but because something she once thought was beneath her now outranked everything she thought she'd moved on to. And when she reached out, she wouldn't be met with anger, just silence. The same silence she once mocked, now weighted with consequence. It was late afternoon, overcast, just enough wind to make the flag at the loading dock crack and curl like it had something to say. I just wrapped a strategy call with the city's mobility lead when I stepped outside for a breather. Fresh air between meetings was the only pause I gave myself anymore. The old headquarters still had that industrial edge, brick, glass, and the hum of progress beneath polished concrete. And there she was, standing on the sidewalk, just beyond the perimeter fence. Arms folded, heels sinking slightly into the crushed gravel at the edge of the parking lot. She wasn't dressed like she wanted to blend in. No, she looked like she'd walked out of one of those magazine spreads she used to tape to our fridge. Perfect hair, statement coat, that necklace I'd seen her wear the night she told me she needed more from life. But what struck me most wasn't the outfit, it was the stillness, like she'd been waiting, not for a ride, not for a friend, for me. I didn't stop, I didn't even break stride. The new glass wall along the south corridor was tinted from the outside, reflective like a mirror in daylight. She couldn't see in, but I could see her clearly, her shoulders squared when she caught a glimpse of movement, me walking the hallway, steps deliberate, gaze forward. The receptionist caught her just as she took 2 uncertain steps toward the entry. "I'm sorry," she said with the clipped calm of someone used to boundary duty. "You'll need to book through the partner portal." "I'm not a client," she replied. The receptionist didn't blink. "Then I'm afraid Mr. Baird doesn't take walk-ins." That name, the way it dropped like stone into a still pond. She wasn't used to hearing it said that way, with weight, with separation. She turned quickly, searched the glass. Her eyes scanned left, right, then landed where I was, just behind the wall, just out of reach. She saw me, but I didn't turn. I kept walking, not fast, not avoiding, just moving, like she was scenery, like the moment had no claim on me, and it didn't. Because recognition is not a key, and proximity is not permission. I heard the rustle of her coat as she shifted, maybe called my name, I'll never be sure. The wall muted everything. That was the point of it, not just function, symbol. Outside, her shoes were wrong for the gravel. She had to be feeling it now. The bite of stones, the sinking, nothing to brace against. Inside, the floor was smooth, clean. Designed for direction. She stayed a while longer. I didn't watch her leave, because there was nothing left to see. She had stood on the same pavement a dozen times when it was ours, when she'd blow kisses through the window or wave with that little twirl she knew made me laugh. But this time, there was no wave, no smile, just a wall of glass. And a truth she couldn't walk through. She used to wave her hand and say, "You do the forms, babe. I trust you." Every time I brought up paperwork, compliance, or legal structure, her eyes would glaze over. "You're good at that stuff," she'd say, already back on her phone, tapping through whatever was trending. So I handled it. I scheduled the notary appointments. I drafted the filing templates. I paid the monthly registration fees she didn't know existed. She never read the terms. She never asked what acronyms meant. As long as she could sign, sigh, and sip her coffee after, she was content. Until her attorney called. I still remember the message, left on my old business line before I rerouted it to an assistant. His voice sounded smooth, practiced, but under the polish was something taut. "Yes, this is Mitchell Swain, legal counsel for Miss Rayleigh. I'd like to discuss the structure of your joint business assets in light of recent events." He used the phrase joint business assets like it still meant something, like the word joint hadn't been severed months ago. The assistant responded professionally. "All queries can be directed to the holding company per the continuity filing. Clause 9 covers disputes. Please refer to the time-stamped archive. It was notarized under Miss Rayleigh's name on April 6th, 3 years prior." A beat later, Mitchell replied with one word. "Ah." He never called again. "Back when we were building together, she said she didn't want to deal with the boring crap. Trademarks, licensing, back-end tech ownership, distribution rights. She said I lit up when I talked about it, so I should just do it. So I did. And in the middle of a boring Tuesday 3 years ago, she signed a dense packet titled Business Continuity and Asset Isolation Agreement. Not flashy, not front page, just a protection file. Boring, as requested. It activated automatically under one condition. In the event of relational fracture defined by behavioral abandonment, infidelity, or breach of fiduciary trust, all critical assets shall transfer to the previously established LLC under exclusive control of the non-breaching party, her initials, her signature, her notary. It had sat in a fireproof box for years, tucked behind vendor agreements and system backup logs, a failsafe, not because I expected betrayal, but because I understood patterns and people. She never opened that box, never asked what was inside. Now she couldn't stop asking. Emails flooded in, first from her, then her legal team. They combed through old statements, contracts, emails, tried to find fault lines, but the chain of custody was pristine, no errors, no backdating, just a clean line from her signature to the transfer. At one point, someone even tried to argue she'd signed under emotional duress, but the notary's logs, video capture, and time-stamped e-signature wiped that claim away. She hadn't been under pressure. She'd just been uninterested, too distracted to care, too confident to imagine a day when the boring crap would be the only thing standing between her and control. Her lawyer sent a final letter, wordy, defensive, polite enough to save face. It ended with, "We acknowledge the validity of the clause and consider the matter concluded." She never sent one herself, not a message, not a call. But I pictured her sitting at some cafe or co-working lounge, staring at the top of that agreement with my name in bold and hers as witness, and wondering how she could have handed away everything with her own hand. Because it wasn't revenge, it was preparation. And in the end, her silence gave me all the signatures I ever needed. The ballroom smelled like polish and projection light, floor-to-ceiling screens flickering with sponsor logos, lanyards swaying as people leaned in for photos and practiced their best strategic handshakes. Somewhere behind the reception tables, a jazz trio played a clean, forgettable tune. Outside, traffic rolled past the hotel with the slow churn of a city pretending not to overheat. Inside, I stood on the main stage, mic clipped at the collar, slides flicking behind me. "Infrastructure is language," I said. "It tells people where they're allowed to go. So ask yourself, who's been left out of the conversation?" Applause came slowly, then steady, the kind that meant they were thinking. Good, that was the point. After the Q&A, a handful of execs approached to shake my hand. A mayor's chief of staff asked if I'd speak on a panel in July. I nodded, gave the assistant my card, my assistant's card. Technically, I didn't carry my own anymore. Then I saw her, near the press wall, leaning just enough to look casual, like she wasn't waiting. But she was. Arms crossed, hair swept over one shoulder the way she used to wear it when she wanted to seem effortless. A conference badge hung from her neck. Blank, no name, no company. She wasn't invited, she just walked in. I made my way toward the hallway exit, past the media table, past the complimentary tote bags. I felt her eyes before I heard her steps. "Logan?" I stopped, turned slowly. She stepped forward, searching my face for something that used to belong to her. Her voice was soft, the kind of soft that tries to sound fragile, the kind that used to make me pause, not this time. "Why didn't you fight for us?" she asked. 5 words. She delivered them like they were a dare. I didn't answer right away. Just looked at her. Really looked. There was nothing left of the woman who once sighed over split weekends or left me lists on the fridge like I was a tenant. She looked polished, yes, but not certain. The coat, the heels, the watch, expensive armor over something she didn't know how to protect anymore. "Why didn't you fight?" she repeated, a little louder now. "You just disappeared." I held her gaze, let the question hang. Then I gave her the only sentence I ever owed. "I don't fight for what's already left." Her lips parted like she wanted to say something else, but nothing came out because deep down she knew. She'd left long before I packed the first box. She'd left when silence became easier than truth, when someone else's laugh sounded more like home. When she saw the contract, the clause, the risk, and thought none of it would matter because I'd never act. But I had, without screaming, without scenes, just motion, measured, precise. I stepped around her and kept walking. No drama, no looking back. Behind me I heard the shuffle of her heels, just enough to know she'd turned to watch. But I didn't stop again. There are moments that close stories, and some moments that rewrite them. This was neither. This was a door shutting in a place she no longer had keys to. Outside, the evening air held that kind of hush cities rarely get. Too late for urgency, too early for regret. The gala lights bounced off chrome hoods and long dresses. Laughter coiled around the steps in slow, practiced bursts. Everyone was performing for someone. I had no need to. Not anymore. The waiting car idled by the curb, its door open, driver silent. I took one step toward it, and then I heard her behind me. "Logan, wait." I didn't turn, just paused. She crossed the distance like someone trying to rewrite time. Careful, unsure, but desperate not to let me disappear without a final line. The velvet rope separating guests from speakers barely slowed her. She stood on the other side, one hand clenched around the strap of her bag, the other reaching, though she didn't know for what. "I know I messed up," she started. "I didn't see it happening. I thought—" "You thought I'd always stay," I said without heat. Just fact. Her eyes shone in the streetlight, not with tears, she wasn't there yet, but with the growing awareness that the ending was no longer hers to edit. "I kept thinking you'd come back, or that I'd get to explain." I stepped closer, but not across the rope. "You don't need to explain," I said, "because I didn't leave to make a point." She blinked. The crowd behind us blurred to background noise. "I left," I continued, "because I heard the truth in someone else's laugh." She flinched, not from volume, from accuracy. I didn't wait for her reply. There was nothing left that could unsay what had already echoed. I stepped into the car. The door shut with a soft click. Behind the velvet rope, she stood frozen. No audience. No defense, just the weight of 1,000 moments she hadn't paid attention to, now stacked in silence around her. The car pulled away. She didn't chase, and I didn't watch.